Welcome back to the live stream. This week we're going to have Paul Krugman. Nah, just kidding. Steve would never let me have Paul on the show. We're going to talk about Argentina this week. Be kind, stay safe, and enjoy the show. Welcome back to the live stream. It's episode number 50. We made it. We're going to talk about Argentina today. We're going to have a kind of an open mic style, so anybody can join the stream. I'll put the link in the chat in a bit. If you are part of Steve's Patreon or Substack, I'll probably give priority to you guys first. But other than that, I'm sure we can fit everybody on who has the courage to come on the show and talk economics with Professor Steve Keen and Professor Mike Radzicki. With that said, let's bring on Mike. Mike, here he is. Here's the cheers.
Hey, Ty.
Hey, it's Thanksgiving down there, right? Is that
Thursday it was, yeah. And then
okay.
Yesterday was Black Friday, where everybody goes nuts at the shopping malls and such. So you stay clear.
Oh.
And so it's a nice 4-day weekend down here.
Very nice. Very nice. I saw a video of it's pretty funny because everything's online. So I saw this video, I think on Twitter, and it was just one person now in the lineup because everybody just shops online. So they had this big grand opening of the door at 6 a.m. in the morning, and one person came in. Just kind of strolled around.
There's still people who like to do the physical shopping thing, and there's some outlet malls in Rentham, Mass, about a half hour or so from me, and apparently the line was so long, stretching for miles to get into the place, that when the last people got in, the stores were closing. So why you would want to, they were interviewing people like in their cars, like, why are you doing this? Oh, it's tradition, it's part of the, it's like, okay, where floats your boat,
Did you have, I guess it's been 2 weeks, your last 2 weeks go okay for you?
Yeah, so the kids are on break, building some new flight simulators for the econ students so they can play around with some macro models, and my barn is about 95% finished. Just trying to, there's a couple of last things that have to be done before I can move in, but I'm getting really close. So I'm looking forward to that. This morning I was doing a bunch of plumbing activities at my house, so that's always fun.
You got your
plumbing is very important when push comes to shove. It's like it's not important until you don't have it or something's goofed up, and then suddenly it's like, uh-oh.
Yeah, it's critical to flushing toilets. So
that's ranks right up there. Yeah,
very, very important. Tony Wilson, what do we have here? We don't get certain things. You need to come on the stream. Let me know what I'm not getting, so I learn. I do this show for education. The challenge is there, Tony. Come on the show. I'll be putting the link in the chat here momentarily, but let's bring on Professor Steve Keen. Here he is.
Hi, guys. I've had a very different weekend with 2 weeks to Mike. I am completely mechanically useless, I've got to admit. I spent so long in the academic stuff that I can't even open a can these days. So I find that quite frustrating, but I'm stuck with it. Arthritis has been giving me an excuse. And I've been working on my chapter on my new book on the chapter on energy, and that has been frustrating as hell because I had to go back and read what the neoclassicals have written about it, which of course is total garbage. And I've been going through all this stuff on production functions and so on. And oh my God, it's read one more neoclassical paper, and I think I'll slash my wrists.
How many chapters are
That can
you
be
in?
messy, Steve. Do it
Sorry?
outside. I said that can be
Oh, thank.
messy. Do it
Yeah, it can
outside.
be. That's true. I've got a balcony. I can hang it over the edge of Amsterdam here. That'd be okay.
You can just put a tarp down too. I've seen that in a lot of gangster
You,
flicks.
you, I came here to be cheered up. What the hell are you guys doing?
How many chapters are you into the book now?
About 12, I think. It's the target was to. Sorry, Ghost. Sorry to disturb you like that. Neoclassical economics. I mean, to me, a form of torture would be being forced to read a series of neoclassical textbooks. Death would be better than having to do that again. I've been doing precisely that to write this book in parts, and so the chapter on I'm up to the chapter talking about the role of energy in production, which now Tony has been saying we've got to get his perspective on, and I want him to walk on stage and tell us. So yeah, yeah. I mean, in terms of the practicality of engineering, so neoclassicals completely ignore the role of energy in production, and I've gone back to the original basis of that. So I've gone right back to the physiocrats. So I'm writing this one from the physiocrats forward. So and I've written every other chapter, like one chapter per week, and this one has taken 2 weeks so far, and I'm about halfway there.
Oh, wow.
So I saw a comment by Tony Wilson coming across the screen here about step functions. So I wanted to say a couple of words that leaped to mind when I saw that comment. So I like what Tony had to say. So a big idea in neoclassical economics is what? Equilibrium. And I know that, well, I mean, when I was a young pup, when I was basically a first week graduate student, PhD student, in a macro class, our first macro class, no other than Joan Robinson came and lectured to us. And somebody asked her a question about equilibrium, and she went, just what is equilibrium? And this diatribe about equilibrium. Well, of course, in system dynamics, equilibrium is quite a boring behavior mode. Everything's a horizontal line. It's a particular kind of steady state. You can have steady state growth and other steady states, chaos. But equilibrium steady state is quite boring. Everything's a horizontal line over time. And of course, if you look at any data from any real living system, it's not a horizontal line over time, right? So it's a rather unrealistic situation. And of course, market's clear and there's a reason for that. But here's my point, and it relates to what Tony said about a step function. In system dynamics modeling, the hardest thing to do when people get interested in it, whether they're using Minsky or Stellar, whatever, Venz, it doesn't matter, is getting them to be a disciplined modeler, because they get very enthusiastic and their heads are loaded with information about some complex system that has a problem, the healthcare system, the insurance system, the lumber system, the energy system, whatever, it doesn't matter, right? And as fast as they can move the mouse, they create this giant stock flow wire icon monstrosity. And then they finally press the go button. And what happens? You got stuff being divided by 0. You got stuff going to infinity. You got negative people. You got all sorts of weird stuff happening. And at this point, usually if it's a student, they come to me and they say, I'm having a problem with my model. Can you help me? And as a professor, I say, sure. Let's open it up and see. And you open it and you're like, there's stuff every which way, up, down, left, and right. Now, you don't throw it away. You tell the student, all right, that's brainstorming. Good. Let's keep that. But let's take one little thing here. Let's open a clean file and let's build a big model by connecting together little models that have been thoroughly tested. Let's put some discipline in here. That's the only way to build a large scale, complex, nonlinear dynamic model. So how do we do that? How do we only connect pieces together when they have been thoroughly tested, so that when they talk to one another, nothing weird happens? Well, there's a variety of ways to do it, but the main way, overwhelmingly the best way, is to put the little piece of structure into equilibrium and then knock it out. Shock it out with a step function, a pulse function, a ramp, a sinusoid noise, a variety of test inputs. And they're exogenous. So it's as though the plane is flying along and it gets hit with a burst of wind or something from the outside. How does the structure absorb the shock, deal with the shock, process the shock? And you're looking to see, not that you believe the shock is truth or real, but rather, if this were to happen, if there's a permanent change in something, a step, what should my piece of structure do properly? And if it does something weird, that tells you something. Like, don't hook that thing up to something else until you fix whatever the problem is. So my point is, we use equilibrium, a real rather neoclassical concept, all the time in dynamic modeling, but we don't believe the real world is in a state of equilibrium. And usually our models, when we run them, are not in equilibrium. But it's a darn useful idea and concept when you're testing a model and building a model, because when you shock it, anything that's not a horizontal line has to be the response of the system to the shock. So it's very easy to see what's going on, right? So, when people say, equilibrium, oh, boo, boo, I'm like, well, yes, I hear what you're saying, but it's a useful tool when we're building a model. And I like Tony's comment.
Mike, do you have we talked about this a few weeks ago. Do you have any experience with basic PID controllers? Just basic ones.
Yes. So we teach that as a part of our curriculum. Yeah. Like if you're familiar with that and you want to know, like, how does that relate to? And it's kind of Bill Phillips' stuff.
I've got a question. And I need a professor that's into this stuff to answer it. I don't know if I've encountered a bug in Minsky or I'm doing something wrong. So I've got onto my little engineering trip just to build controllers. I think it expands my mind with system dynamics. So I've been watching a lot of MATLAB Simulink videos. Unfortunately, they just have plugins. You can just put a PDF controller on and it doesn't really show the equations. I've read the equation itself on Wikipedia. So, and Steve will probably answer this too. So I'm assuming this is a bug. You can get the differential of a flow, correct? Through time, the change of the flow. Okay, then it is a bug. The D in my controller does not work in Minsky for some reason. As soon as
okay, hang on. So you've got to
remember that file I sent to you. As soon as I
haven't had a look at it, I'm afraid to say, but yeah.
Oh, thanks. Remember, you've got your error term, which is the difference between your set point and where the value actually is. I've wired in Minsky, you do all this wiring, you don't type it out. I've wired that directly into the differentiate block, which is a flow. And then I take that and multiply with my derivative gain. And then I add that to my integral and proportional gain. And that's supposed to give me my 3. But as soon as I wire it, hit it to the plus operator, it goes to 0, my derivative variable. So I'm guessing that is definitely a bug.
Whack a little mini example and send it to me and Russell. And I mean, first of all, you better tell the audience what PID stands for.
So that stands for proportional, integral, and derivative controller. So in every mechanical piece of machinery we have controllers, like on thermostats, right? Or a better example would be your cruise control in a car. Now, obviously, you don't want to set it so you set 60 miles or kilometers an hour. You don't want it to go to the floor and your head whips back. There's a slow rise. What you'll get with a proportional only controller, as Mike will always say, is a steady state error where it never reaches or goes above your set point, but never reaches the equilibrium of your set point. You can then add the next component, which is an integral, And often it on its own or in combination will cause oscillations around the equilibrium set point until it finally gets to a steady state. That's obviously not very good for cruise control. If you have a 60 mile per hour speed limit and it overshoots and goes to 100 miles an hour, you're going to get a speeding ticket. And then you have your derivative, which is basically it knows the future, how close you're getting to your set point, and will slow down the acceleration so you don't overshoot. Now, a combination of all those three, you can get your rise up to your set point. Hopefully, you don't overshoot it too much, and you fall into your steady state right on the set point. That is a PID controller. And why I'm making that in Minsky is I've had the idea that there could be some application either by the central bank or government, and I know this is going to be really out there, that they would use some sort of mathematical PID controller to control where they want the employment rate to be, or where they want some sort of interest rate to be, and it would be controlled automatically and tuned according to the variables of the particular economy. And that's why.
And that was Bill Phillips's idea in the 1950s.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what Bill was doing.
He went to his grave despondent that he would be remembered for the Phillips curve, something he did on a weekend when he was stuck inside when it was raining, and not for this idea, because he was an electrical engineer by original training, by bringing PID controlling ideas into Keynesian economics, with the idea of you need an entity to stabilize the system. That there'd be rules, like you're saying, that are derived from engineering and science, rather than political whim or the benevolent but misguided efforts of humans to try and figure out what's going on. So.
And then that was the real, Phillips was the intention. I think, and so I regard Phillips as an effective predecessor of Forrester, though unlike Forrester, he never got anybody to code it for him. So who was the person that Forrester got to code Dynamo?
Jack Pugh.
So, yeah,
Alexander Jack Pugh. Yeah, it's one of his doctoral students.
That was about 1956, wasn't it?
Jack started working about 58, I think. He was preceded by Simple. He didn't do Simple. That was simulation of industrial management problems with lots of equations.
Lots of equations. What are the like? Actually, that's my second favorite acronym of all time. My favorite acronym is COCO. You know what COCO stands for?
No.
The Campaign to Outlaw Contrived and Outrageous Acronyms.
Oh, okay. Makes sense. Yeah, WPI, we had a long time ago a committee on committees.
Oh, so dear. Again, a COC, in other words. Yeah, okay, yeah. Okay. So, we're being very serious here, aren't we? Okay.
Should we just touch on Argentina, since it's a pretty big economic story? Does anybody want to kind of just dive into that and give their thoughts on what's going on there? I have my opinions. Steve, go ahead.
Oh, look, I'm one of those things completely not left field, it's right field, of course, where this guy comes from. And all of a sudden we have a radical hairdo running Argentina in the same way we had a radical hairdo running America 5-6 years ago. He wants to, if he goes to dollarizing, then I think the main constraint he's going to face is that if he actually does replace the peso with the dollar, then Argentina can't afford to have a trade deficit. Because if you have a trade deficit, you're losing American dollars all the time. You need American dollars to pay whatever debt you're incurring to buy commodities. And there's quite a possibility that he could, be forced to trash the economy when he thinks he's going to be boosting it. The only way to survive, if you're having a massive trade deficit, lefties always attack the man. I'm attacking the ideas, okay? Please.
D Bruce, come on the live stream.
Yeah, please, yeah. If you have a dollarized currency, which is what he's talking about doing, replacing the peso with the dollar, I honestly don't know if he's got the power to do that. We have to wait and see whether he actually has the power to implement some of the things he's talking about in Argentina. But he wants to abolish the central bank. Now, what's that going to do for bank settlements and bank clearing? there's more than one bank in Argentina, so you need a clearinghouse. So that's one thing I'm wondering whether he's actually. I mean, presume he's conscious of it, but
It
being an
should be no
Austrian,
it should be noted he's a minority in Congress, so it's going to be difficult
well,
to
okay,
do and also I was doing a little research this morning during the first and second rounds of the election. I guess they have runoffs there. He walked back the statement that he's going to abolish the central bank. He is now going to fix it, whatever that means.
okay. What about dollarizing the economy? He's talking about going from the peso to the American dollar.
And I think he's still doing that mechanically. How he does it or achieves that, that's debatable, but that is still his plan somehow,
Mm,
while still
yeah.
maintaining the Argentinian central bank.
I mean, I spent a fair bit of time in Ecuador, and Ecuador dollarized quite some time ago, and you had a left-wing government in control at the time with a dollarized economy. So it's not as a left-wing or right to do it. It was just one way to control runaway inflation. Suddenly, all your prices are denominated in another currency. Um, but the danger is you've got to be running a trade, at least a balance, but a trade, if not a surplus, because otherwise the dollars start leaving the country, and you've then got to, keep the monetary supply at least constant. You've got to bring in more dollars, and you end up with if you have a trade deficit, and I'm pretty certain that's Argentina's situation. Then you're running out of dollars all the time, and ultimately your only solution is to suppress the economy radically, which doesn't make you popular whether you're left wing or right wing. I'll take a look and see what I'll take a look at the Atlas of Economic Complexity to see what their trade balance is, because I don't follow Argentina closely, so I don't really know whether they're in a surplus or deficit. But if
So
they're in a
it's
deficit
I
and they go
just
for
got
dollarizing, that's
I just got it here. It's $800 million in deficit for 2022. So
yeah, okay. Well, that's
yeah.
not a good position to be starting to dollarize from.
Hmm. Yeah.
So that's what concerns me. Yeah, but otherwise, I mean, I'm too busy on other stuff to ever really focus too much on an individual country, including my own Australia.
Mhm.
So I'll have a listen to what you've picked up and taking a look at
All right,
it so far, Ty.
Mike, add your thoughts.
Mike.
Yeah, I've mentioned it before on this broadcast. I'll say it again. When I first turned to contracting, remodeling, stuff that I do on the side, you have the impossible trilemma, right? Where you have the cost of the project, the quality of the project, and the timeliness of the project. And a contractor will tell you, pick two. If you want it cheap and you want it of high quality, it's not going to be done quickly. They'll get to it when they get to it, maybe during the winter downtime or something. If you want it high quality and done quickly, it's not going to be cheap. And if you want it low cost and done quickly, it's not going to be of high quality, right? So pick two. So I think it was Mundell won the Nobel in economics, came up with the impossible trilemma, and it was the same kind of thing. You got three sorts of monetary policy areas. Setting your interest rates, or if you will, independent monetary policy. Free capital flows. Do you allow money to come in and out of the country when businesses and households feel like it at their leisure? And a stable exchange rate. So what do you want to control? If you want to control interest rates and the exchange rate, you got to have capital constraints, right? If you want free flowing capital and fixed exchange rates, you give up setting interest rates and so forth. So you got to pick your policy space, right? And different nations select different pairs of, what do you want to do? So I think in modern monetary theory, the idea is a sovereign nation with a sovereign fiat currency gives the most flexibility to policymakers to correct economic problems, right? It gives them the most tools. And as soon as you dollarize, have a currency board, this sort of thing, you might be a sovereign nation, but you don't, and you might be using a fiat currency, but it's not sovereign anymore. You have to go get it. You can't keystroke it into existence. So you in some sense tie your hands, but the trade-off is you'll get in some areas more stability. So it kind of depends on the situation that you're in. It might make sense. But I think as a general principle, having the most flexibility to solve problems would be, don't dollarize, have your own currency and control it.
Yeah, so I think the main issue at hand is 147% inflation year over year. The responsible thinking says, how do you stop that immediately? And my thought was that maybe a 5-year plan of dollarization would stop that immediate inflation, and then make a plan to go back to a sovereign peso. Because Mike, you're absolutely right. Why would you want to give away? I think, well, MMT is right. Why would you want to give away your sovereign ability to create your own currency? And another thing that plays out. Go ahead, Steve.
But 147% rate of inflation is a good reason to try something.
Yes.
So, I mean, in that particular case, the idea you suddenly, denominate in a different currency, and even if it is a currency you can't control, then you potentially put a stop to that spiral straight away. And that I think was partly behind Ecuador's dollarization 20, 25, 30 years ago.
And so, question here from
100% agree. Yeah.
Ghost on the Half Shell. I would suspect, and Mike and Steve might disagree, but this is a classic case of a spiral effect of inflation, where prices have gone up, expectations continue to go up that inflation is going to occur in the future. People demand more wages, firms keep raising prices, and it's just a spiral at this point, and you just got to stop it. That's how I suspect the situation is in Argentina, which would suggest that dollarization would stop that problem in its tracks. But at the same time, I think Argentina is such a powerful, has such the great potential to be a wealthy, prosperous country, that it needs its own sovereign currency to manage the resources it does possess. And we have Tony that's come into the waiting room. Tony Wilson, do you have the courage? He's here. Anybody else who has the courage to come on the show, I'm going to put the link in the chat again. You're welcome to come on. Don't be shy. Tony, make sure you turn on that camera. I want to bring you on the show. Make sure you hit that like button on the Prof. Steve Keen YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe and get notifications every week that we're doing a show. Tony, I see you there. I'm going to bring you on right now. Tony, here he is. Look at this. Cheers for Tony.
Hi, Tony. Particularly at 3 o'clock in the morning. That's dedication. You're muted. You're muted.
You've got his. Yeah, we're not muting you on your end. Your mic is off.
Yeah. Can you try to work it out? But let's see. There's a setting down the bottom, mute. The wheel on the right-hand side of settings. If you click on that, you're going to get audio as one of the options, and it should show you which system you're using. So down the bottom, below your face, the gear. Click on the gear thing there, right-hand side. You see it? And this is not looking good for engineers, mate. You're letting the side down. Yeah. Also, you press the letter S. Just simply type the letter S, Tony. Press S. And then the window should come up, and you should see what microphone you're using. You see it there? Oh, we're stuck here. This is.
Yeah, we'll let him keep working it out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, Tony's working the problem. I wanted to react to. I think Ghost on the Half Shell said something about heart rhythms being chaotic or somewhat chaotic time shapes, if you will. And there's a physicist I know in Denmark named Erik Mosekilde. And I spent about 3 weeks in his physics laboratory some years ago. And although he's a physicist by training, he works with a lot of medical doctors on human physiological modeling with system dynamics. And what he'll do is like take a sheep's kidney and build a model of it, and then inject it with a simulated drug and see what happens, and then take a real sheep's kidney and do the actual drug, stuff like that. But when he was working with human subjects, he would have them, his students, he'd pay them to like lay in a hospital bed for 24 hours, and every half hour they would take a sample of whatever it was, cholesterol or whatever he was measuring, and he would plot it. And guess what? When somebody says, what's your cholesterol or what's your blood pressure, and you give them a number, it's, well, at the moment it was measured. But when you plot it, you see these systems were oscillatory in the human body. And his theory was that all of the oscillations in all the systems in the human body oscillate, but they have to oscillate with chaotic signals, because otherwise the signals would entrain. So entrainment occurs when, let's say, pendulum clocks at a clock shop. The store owner comes in the morning and starts the pendulums all swinging. At the end of the day, they're all swinging together. That's called entrainment, where oscillatory systems, in the case of vibrations on the wall, they talk to one another. Or fireflies, they come out at night, and at the end of the night, they're oscillating together. So he said, if the human systems were non-chaotic, all the systems in the body would entrain, and then you'd be like manic, and then you couldn't get out of bed, and then you'd be manic again. So he was trying to show that all the systems behave chaotically. And I was reminded of that by Ghost on the Half Shell's comment.
So you're saying the human body, the human body is the Lorentz system, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. What are you going to say, Steve?
Just checking on Tony and the sound. Have we got any luck or not?
No.
None of us. So it's got to be your end.
You got your mute. Do you have your mute button on?
Yeah.
No. Interesting.
Oh dear. Look, tell you what, we might kick you out of the show for a while and see if you can work out what's going on with your sound there.
And maybe just re-logging in.
I do want to have you on here.
Logging back in might help. Yeah.
Yeah. Try to turn your computer, restart your computer. Don't do a turn off, but just do a restart. Come back. You've got the link, and we'll try again. Okay.
Okay. Good.
Okay.
Yep.
Wow.
So much for that. Good.
Our first open show is not working out so far.
No. Yeah. What about Lana? Is Lana here?
Lana, I haven't seen her in the chat.
She hates the clock.
Oh, go ahead, Ghost. Come on, that's true. Well, I'm stuffing up the clock this week, so maybe she didn't like getting stuffed by me. Have a Ghost on the Half Shell. Why don't you pop in?
Yeah.
Come on,
Ghost. Come on the show. You're a YouTuber.
Who cares? Come over. This is open house. It's a bit like, you invited into a drinks party. We can talk about anything you want to talk about, including aerospace.
Yeah.
Come on.
And how about Brad Arthurton? You've got some really good questions here on Argentina. That it would actually be nice if you just came on and asked them, and I'd give you a response that was not relevant. Anybody, come on, I challenge you. How about the Minstrel 55, Thomas Sergette? How about you come on so you can tell me how to pronounce that last name?
Yes.
And we can settle it once and
we're throwing a party. Nobody wants to come indoors.
Yeah. This was like my seventh.
With adult fraternity. What a pity.
Yeah, this was like my seventh year birthday. Yeah.
What happened? Nobody turned
came.
Up?
Yeah, it's still a childhood trauma. Yeah. Oh, who we got? We got Ghost.
Okay.
Ghost.
Hello. Testing. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, we definitely
can hear you.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I've turned off the camera because I don't have ideal camera conditions. So.
No, we got somebody. Thomas is here. All right, let's bring Thomas on. Thomas.
Hey, Thomas. So where are you calling in from?
Okay. Hi from
The
Poland.
lag is
Tomas.
real.
Tomasz.
Tomasz,
Surday. Yeah.
Tomas. Say your last name. Thomas.
Sure,
Tomas.
Jay?
Yeah, Tomasz.
Say your last name.
Surday.
Surday.
Okay.
Okay. Nobody's gotten that one right the whole time.
Nobody. No.
This is the perfect time, Mike. Make sure you get it right. Top chatterers and commenters from last week. Mike, go ahead.
Oh boy. Hans Rudolph Suter, Dave Collins, Alex Plant, Chris, Ghost on the Half Shell, Wayne McMillan, Tony Wilson, Paul Butala, Stephen Hinton, Jonathan Gibson, Ernesto, Eduardo, Dabgarganes, Larry Summers, Lost Adult, Michael D'Souza Cruz, WWE Fan 0104, The Hasty Ent, Algorithm, The Minstrel 55, Thomas Surday, TR, Dragai, Danger Zone, Economics in One Lesson, Duncan McGowan, Botch Mandela, The Libertarian, and Matthias Sedin. I didn't think about it. I just rolled.
Yeah, no, you did really well, Mike. We've got the Minstrel 55. We'll bring him on. I don't know how many people we can fit on screen here.
Wow, yeah, we've never, yeah.
So we've got 3 so far. Anybody else? Come on.
Thomas has got a double feedback. You might have are you using a laptop and you're using a laptop speaker as well as headphones?
No, it's computer.
But the computer, if you're using a computer speaker and I think it's a computer sound system, you're likely to get the feedback you're complaining about. So, no, it's wrong. YouTube, you've got YouTube running. Turn off the sound on YouTube.
Yes, that can.
Yeah,
Steve is right. That's
yeah.
That can,
Okay.
YouTube is legs behind us by about 8 seconds.
Yeah, you've got to silence YouTube. Yeah.
The Minstrel 55, buddy. I'm glad you're here. It's good to see your face. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
A bit sound delay. A bit of sound delay there. Yeah.
I'm worried
very
about
important.
the delay.
Douglas, we've got a party.
We've got Douglas, the MMT macro trader, is in.
How's it going, guys?
Hey,
Hi, Douglas. How are you
what happened to
doing?
you?
I'm still here. We're here. We're good.
Fair enough.
I thought you fell off the planet.
I am on the planet.
Caffeinated? Probably.
Right? Yeah, caffeinating actually right now. Yeah.
Minstrel, whereabouts are you calling in from? Minstrel? What's your hometown? Minstrel? Minstrel 55? Whereabouts are you calling in from? Yeah.
From South Africa.
What part of the planet? Africa. Okay.
South Africa.
So it's like
South
the middle of the night
Africa.
for him, right?
So hold on.
Yeah.
So we've got the. That's okay. We've got the globe with us right now. We've got Tony if he comes back. He's in Australia. We've got
In Brisbane. Yep.
Yeah, we've got an individual from South Africa, the Minstrel 55. Tomas is in, was it Poland? Okay, Poland.
Good. Yeah, wow.
And we've got Douglas, of course, he's down in the States. Steve, you're in Hungary? Amsterdam right now.
Being here for the weekend, yeah.
Damn you, I'm too envious.
Power cuts and heat waves. So that's what's happening. The minstrel. I've seen since about the power cuts in South Africa. Is that why there is no lights on behind you?
No lights.
Doug, what happened to your live stream? I haven't seen you in about a month. What's going on there?
We're gonna be back up soon, maybe in a week or two. I've been doing some work with a team of guys, and we've been putting together some good stuff that we'll be having out soon. So we'll be back very soon. It'll be some exciting research to drop, and when the chat gets going, I don't want to cut off anyone if they had other questions, but I do have a direct question for Steve and Ty. Maybe, well, I mean, actually, all three of you guys. Maybe you guys can chime on in. So Ty, when you want me to, let me fire the question away again. If anyone else who normally doesn't get a chance to get on,
no, let's fire your question away and let's get this going.
So we were doing some research, and particularly regarding strikes and kind of wage demands from strikes, and my understanding from the debt deflation model is this dynamic between the capitalists, the workers, the profits that are generated, and that ultimately there's a squeeze of the profits, so the capitalists will lay off their workers, and that causes the cycle. And my just kind of gut assumption would have been that it's because the workers start to demand more wages that would squeeze the profit margins that might cause, prick the bubble. What was interesting as we were looking into this, and again, my intuition just seemed like it had to have been correct, but when I looked into it, you oftentimes see, and I think we're in a similar spot right now after 2022 being a very kind of disinflationary period, kind of a rollover of a business cycle in 2022. We're seeing this time frame where we're getting a lot of strikes and a lot of requests for a lot of labor push for higher wages. And actually, if you go on the Fred, unfortunately, the data series stopped in the 1970s. You can see like labor man hours on strike or something like that. And there's always these pops that seem to happen after recessions. So it seems like my intuition was wrong, and that it's actually the drive from the laborers to ask for more wages that actually gives kind of a boost to the business cycle. Steve, Mike, Ty, have you ever thought of this dynamic? Apparently, this is something even that Marx realized, that there's this this contradiction. I forget the exact term that he used, but this contradiction of accumulation or something like that. What's your take? I've set the stage. Give me your thoughts if this is anything that's kind of run across your radar before or something you've looked into.
It happens all the time. Like when you look at this, is actually where nonlinear dynamics is so important, and why neoclassicals are useless on that front, because they try to leave non-equilibrium factors out of their models. The basic Goodwin model has profits being output minus wages. It's a simple two-caste system. So, and then you look at why is it nonlinear? Is because the wage bill is the level of employment times the wage rate. So what you've got is like a semi-quadratic in that sense. So as you get profit will rise as you have rising investment. Investment will cause an increased level of economic activity, and only what you get is like if you look at two sinusoidal waves, the wages one runs slightly behind the profit one, so that you get a peak level of profit, and that's where your peak level of investment occurring. And then at that point, because unemployment's been driven down low enough, that's when workers start to get wage rises. So it is a this is actually working in completely continuous time. There's no time delays in it at all. But what you get is the same sort of thing as a sine versus a cosine. One will be lagged behind the other, even though caused instantaneously, one causes the other. So what cuts off the trade cycle in the Goodwin model, which is basically Marx's model from 1867, is the increase in the wage bill as a lagged response to a fall in the unemployment rate caused by a high level of investment.
So why isn't this just, a variation of any natural system with predator, prey, and a large ecosystem?
Well, it is. Yeah. I mean, this is why it's so frustrating to be dominated by economists who don't understand cycles at all, and believe cycles are shocks to an equilibrium system.
So let me
insanely wrong. But it's basically dynamic systems will have phase differences, and that's what you see in the predator-prey model. That's what you also see, I believe, in the income distribution data.
So let me ask then a follow-up question just to make sure if the way I'm going to phrase this is going to make it look like I'm siding with the capitalists on this one. I'm not. I'm just saying if the capitalists never gave in to the labor pressure and increase the wages, right? You weren't allowed to have strikes. You weren't allowed to ask for a wage increase. Would the cycle, in theory, then last longer? Is that, again? I'm not saying this is what I want. I'm just saying, in theory, would the cycle last longer?
It would.
It would.
Okay.
Okay.
Extend the cycle. But like the real danger with, I guess, is why you've got to build a complete model, as complete as you can, uh, is that the Goodwin's model and Maslow's model is two social classes, workers and capitalists. The real world has got at least three: workers, capitalists, and bankers. And what
Yeah,
you get out
yeah.
of and what you get out of this, and this is what comes up in my Minsky model as well. When you have so this is modeling Minsky rather than just modeling Goodwin. Uh, if you have capitalists who wish to invest in an aggressive sense, which is actually what you think you might want, when the desired level of investment exceeds retained earnings, they have to borrow money. So when they borrow money, that means they can invest more, so you get more endogenous
The
growth
growth.
coming
Yeah,
out
yeah.
of that.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
But that also means that over time, this share, because they've got that's like a long run accumulator, like carbon dioxide in the capitalist economy, you can regard as being the level of private debt. And as you accumulate that debt each time, then you've got a second deduction. You have the rate of interest times the level of debt. Now, if you also, I tend to treat the rate of interest as a constant. I don't make it a variable in my model, but of course it will be a variable in the real world. So if you get the central bank putting up interest rates and trying to control the economy that way, what they're doing is they're increasing the earnings of the financial sector and trashing the earnings of the industrial sector. And then that can give you another way the cycle turns down.
Okay.
All
Okay.
all right,
So,
Ghost, you've got a question for Steve.
Thanks for that, Steve. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's an old. Supposedly Nixon successfully tamped down inflation in the 70s by imposing wage and price freezes, and it supposedly worked. It's, if it really did, that would seem to be the appropriate response for Argentina rather than fooling around with the central bank, right? If
Yeah, but
that's
that, but to do that, you've got to have organised unions. And like I was actually involved in this back in
okay.
Australia, and what was called the Accord, which was formed under the left wing, moderately speaking, Labor
Hmm.
government, which had what they call the Prices and Incomes Accord. And the idea there was that you get workers into the form of trade unions and manufacturers agreeing not to fight over the distribution of income. Because again, what you see with uh, the bargaining power of workers, if it depends upon the unemployment and the employment rate, then when employment falls, their bargaining power also falls. But when you have a
Okay.
high level of employment, there's a strong capacity to bargain. And the unions agreed not to bargain for those wage rises, but to instead take some of the increase in the form of superannuation, which took some of the buying power out of the economy. So the prices and incomes accords was something the Swedish government was into as well, and it is a way of saying that the ultimate cause of a inflation is going to be struggles over the distribution of income. And here, like I can give some comments from some knowledge of Argentina. That there's I've forgotten the author's name, but there's a brilliant paper I read decades ago in the Festschrift book for Jeff Harcourt from an Argentinian economist, and he pointed out that the distribution of income in America and most advanced capitalist economies is about 30% going to profit and 70% going to wages. That's roughly the proportions neoclassicals use in their models as well, that they don't understand it. Uh, in and so therefore what you find is capitalist consumption was about 30% of the consumption and workers' consumption was about 70%. When you go to Argentina and most of the Latin American countries, it's the other way around. Capitalist consumption is about 60%, workers' consumption 40%. So an enormous amount of the price pressure comes out of capitalists trying to keep up with the capitalists in America and getting a much higher level of income than the working class gets in Argentina. So what you've got is a very strong pressure whenever there's a fall in unemployment, there's a strong desire for higher wages, and then you get caught in that spiral of wages going up and markups going up and wages going up and markups going up. So I certainly can't comment as if I know what I'm talking about for Argentina, but I wouldn't be amazed that that's part of the underlying cause of the conflict, the extreme share of GDP that capitalists take down there versus the very small share for workers. Whenever workers want a wage rise, bang up go markups, and then you get the spiral taking place.
So
so
it can I say something? It sounds like they are in a particularly unique situation that's not we've not encountered before historically, right? And that would imply that the solution has to attend to those
I think
dynamics.
I think it's a long run thing for Argentina because I know, like I've had so many ridiculous little run-ins with people over time that I learned these little snippets by the by. And one was, I'll give it a personal history. I had a French girlfriend who was sort of in Australia, who's one of her best friends, worked in the Argentinian embassy, and we then he arranged for us to have a discussion about Argentina, and at one point he said, "Look, Argentina's overseas debt at this stage roughly 40 billion US dollars." He said, "We're almost certain there's at least 40 billion dollars in the offshore bank accounts of wealthy Argentinians." So a huge part of the problems of Argentina come down to this extreme disparity of income and the desire for the ultra wealthy to hang on to that margin, and therefore you get, as soon as there's any sign of workers getting an extra wage, then bang they put the markups up as well, and you get a very, very fast response giving you that inflation. Plus, also, I'm sure, I mean, I don't know, but I'm guessing it'd also be a depreciating currency causing import prices to rise. So all those put together, and you was what 185% inflation rate you were saying, Ty?
147 currently in Argentina. Yeah.
Whoa.
I don't think wages are keeping up either. So they actually just read a report. It's 1 in 10 people in Argentina are now below the poverty line, which is obviously 10%, which is obviously causing some social unrest in their economy. I want to go through everybody that's here. I think I'll pick, we'll go to Thomas. Thomas first. Thomas, I want you to, Tomas. Tomas.
Oh, you
There's
hear me now. You hear me now,
two
finally.
Tomases there. There are two Thomas and Tomas.
Yeah, so we're going with Sergey. Right?
Surde.
Tell me about yourself quickly, and if you have any questions for Steve Keen or Mike, shoot them.
I don't have any questions. Well, I'm in Poland. I'm a lawyer. Yeah, basically. Yeah. I just wanted to share a meme from Twitter. I translated it. But do you see it?
Let's bring it up here.
Yeah.
There we go. Yeah.
I think he's going to have to translate. I don't know.
You don't see those on the side?
Excuse me.
Ben Bernanke. Okay, Ben Bernanke. Quantitative easing, 8 billion USD, Nobel Prize in trillion, 2022. Adam Galepski, Polish central bank chief. QE, 85 billion.
So basically, if you have a criminal record, you're guaranteed a Nobel Prize in economics.
No. It's basically saying it's our neoliberals in this country say that he should be fined with, he should receive prison time for his criminal activities. QE. That his monetary loosening was criminal activity basically, and that's the thing the government wants to put everybody who was in the previous government into prison. I don't know. Maybe you don't understand the context.
Yeah,
that's it. I get it. All economists should be put in prison, except for Steve and Mike, because I don't have many friends, so I need to keep the few I have out of prison.
Neither do I.
Let's go through continue to go through the list here. Let's Tom, buddy. You're front and center. Tell me about Tom.
Oh, I'm just the guy that found Steve's little blue thumbnail back in 2016 and realized, this is the person who knows how things work. So, a lot of that. I usually,
You're kind of breaking up. Your internet connection is a little bit hard to hear. That's all right. We'll stick around there, Tom. We'll go to the next guy on the list. Let's just get a little more background from the Minstrel 55. Minstrel 55, you're in South Africa right now. What got you into economics? How did you find Steve Keen? How did you find this show? Tell us about it. The Minstrel 55, you're front and center. Tell us. Or I'm going to have to put Douglas on.
He has a 55-second time delay, unfortunately. So let's see.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's an internet connection hassle, unfortunately.
I see.
Yeah.
We can
Not
defer
gonna
to
work,
Steve's
Minstrel, I'm
greater
afraid.
experience in this area.
Okay. Well, actually, we'll give him a few more seconds here. Silence. Okay. Well, we got to keep the show rolling. Ghost, I know you're not on screen, but you have been with us since the beginning. Oh, hold on,
There
Ghost.
he is.
Let's go ahead.
Have you had, hello, how are you?
Tell us.
I hope that, okay, let me fix my.
Yeah, too slow. We got to keep going though. Ghost, tell me. Back to you. How did you kind of find Steve Keen, Ghost? How did you find the live stream? And tell us a little bit about yourself. Ghost on the half shelf. Go ahead.
I found Steve through YouTube. So small miracle there, and I found you all through YouTube, mostly because you may notice I have a certain criticism of most economics. My own background is software engineering. Basically, I'm a STEM omnivore, if you will. I have the weird, I guess, word virtue of taking both applied math. I dropped out from physics into applied math, but I loved anthropology, so I actually had a complete lower division education in it. But so you might guess I have sort of a broad spectrum of things. But mostly I just gnawed away at software for many years. One of my earliest jobs was actually industrial applications for steel industry and whatnot. So I've kind of bounced since then. Am I still here?
You're still here.
That's a very solid
I just got
CV.
a thing about being unmuted.
What do you program in? What are your I know that most people use several languages, but what's your primary language for programming?
Well, the last couple of years I was noodling around in Godot or Godot, which is a programming language.
Yeah.
They have their own scripting languages, roughly Python-esque. But I've been in C, C++. I spent some time at JavaSoft. So I spent a lot of time in the Java realm. I've been through a little bit of everything for a very long time. I've played around with some various languages, but largely Java, largely C, largely C++, although I try to avoid it because it's you can harm yourself greatly in that language.
And that's what Minsky's primary language is C++ and then JavaScript using what's called, you probably know, TypeScript.
Yes.
So you've got to be I mean, Russell is just ludicrous in terms of his knowledge of C++. So
yes, I noodled around in some of his other things. He's doing stuff with I've sort of forgotten the proper terms for it, but it's basically sort of meta programming.
Yeah, that's right.
Which
inheritance and class, heavy use of classes. Well, Andrew, I don't know what you're talking about. You say if I offended anybody, I apologize. I don't know. I don't feel. Has anybody been offended by Andrew?
I've been I've been terribly offended by Andrew because you haven't come on the show yet.
Yeah,
and I've got an open offer, and I see Lana Dell hates the clock. Lana, we're kind of just letting Lana. Why don't you come on the show too? Say hello. Let me put the link in the chat again here. Paste. Douglas, everybody that watches the show already knows you, so I'm not going to ask who you are, but I just want your opinion on the current Argentina situation. Go ahead, Douglas.
I think he's going to have amazing success controlling inflation. I think the 50% unemployment rate that they will have a year or two from now will take care of any inflation that they're facing. No, we'll see. We'll see. I mean, who knows what he's actually able to get done politically, and we'll let it play out. And you know, at the end of the day, I'm more about kind of tracking the data and seeing what comes of the data and how things play out, as opposed to trying to win any political points. But unfortunately, I think he's going to be incredibly successful, especially if he's able to get all the government layoffs that he wants. And and I mean, if I was king of Argentina right now, I'd drop interest rates probably negative, and I think that would thoroughly crush the inflation. I know I'm a contrarian on that point, but I certainly wouldn't give up my sovereignty over my currency, and but you know. We'll see. I mean, obviously anything can happen. I don't, there are politicians in this country, and my country being America, that I can't stand. But sometimes even the biggest idiots make the best decisions, or fall into the best decisions. So we'll see how it plays out. But certainly, I think if he lays off half the government employees, that's not gonna end well. And I think he's gonna have a tough time pegging to the dollar, or using the dollar, or whatever. But we'll see. We'll let it ride. We'll let it ride and see what comes of it.
So we've got who do we got next here? Tony Wilson. Is your audio working? Tony, you
can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. All right, Tony. Tony, tell me what I don't know about engineering.
Okay. Well, do you want a brief background of where I've come from?
Sure.
Okay. I'm Australian. I used to be able to swim pretty good. I got a scholarship to go to the University of Illinois in the mid-'80s, which was right in the middle of Reagan's Star Wars. So it made it for an interesting time. Finished my degree, got back to Australia. Of course, our space program basically failed when the rubber band broke. But I've slummed it in what I call control systems ever since. And that's, so when Mike's talking about PID loops and stuff like that, that's what I've done for the last 30 years. In 2002, at the 30th anniversary of the last moonwalk, Harrison Schmidt, one of the two guys who was on that mission, and who I had got to watch as a very small child, sitting in class in front of a black and white TV, watched him trip over and fall on his face on the moon. I actually got to meet him. And he said we were likely to be going back to the moon to mine it for helium-3, which is the rare form of helium that's missing a neutron, which they think they can use in nuclear fusion reactors. So I was like, well, I've got a background in automation, robotics, aerospace. These guys might send me to the moon if I can get experience in mining. So I trundled off to the Australian mining industry, which was fortunate, because we had to feed the Chinese mega beast with plenty of iron ore. So I got this great pile of experience in building complex stuff in the middle of nowhere. And it's actually got a lot of similarities to building on the moon. It takes 3 days to get anything, just like it does on the moon. It takes 3 days to get there. But what I really got a big background in was things like water and energy. Because a mine site, you have to have water to do the processing. You've got to also have all of the accommodation for people. It's just this giant pile of infrastructure when you build a new mine in the middle of nowhere. You've got to build an airfield, because you've got to fly people in and fly people out. You've got to build roads. You've got to build all this stuff. It's, this idea that mining is just a hole in the ground. Yeah, that's nothing. Digging the hole in the ground is nothing. Building everything else that has to be done. And I'll look at some of the stuff NASA are talking about with building a moon base, and they really don't get it. And when you talk about things like Elon Musk going to Mars, they really don't get it. They've never done the sort of work I've done. When you go out, like My last major project was making a sewage treatment plant work. Now, you might want to sit there and go, why would somebody with an IQ like I've got, with a background like, want to go and work on a sewage treatment plant? Guess what? If you go and build a moon base, you've got human beings, they're going to poo and they're going to pee. You've either got to deal with the sewage or you're going to be just drowning in shit. So these are the things that I've done. But in about 2016, I got this really weird little consult job where from Taiwan, an engineer wanted an Australian engineer to assess Australia's future energy needs. And I got this incredible shock that Australia, at the base load system, I'll assume that everybody understands the difference between base load power and load following. And we'd privatised all of our base load power stations. We'd stopped building them. The last major baseload power station in Australia was built about 2005 in Western Australia. Before that, on the east coast of Australia, where most of our population is, we have not built a major baseload power station since the 1990s. And that's insane. When I started looking around the world, the same in California. California haven't built, they built one major baseload power station since the late 1980s. France hasn't built one since the mid-1990s. The British are currently building Hinkley Point C. The French have just announced they're building a bunch of them. And I'll give you this very, very simple supply-demand graph, which I've drawn. I'll hopefully hold this up so you can all see it. Right. There's your supply-demand. The red line represents population. The blue line represents power stations. And this is why I'm talking to Ty about step functions. Because when you turn on a baseload power station, one day it's off, the next day it's on. And the reason, when you had Steve's wonderful Keynesian economics, they built baseload power stations ahead of the population curve, because population curve designates how much energy you need. It's proportional. So if you're ahead of it, you've always got a society that's got an oversupply of energy, which makes it cheap. That's why it always appeared as if the government power company couldn't make any money. They weren't there to make money. They were there to drive growth. So what happens is that when you privatize, you suddenly get to this horizontal line. Because if you're a private company, your job, according to Milton Friedman, is to make money. Your job isn't to provide society with the ability to grow. This is really, really, like, I did all of one class in economics. It was Econ 101, University of Illinois, and they ran supply demand graph. They were this stuff down our throats for a couple of months. So I find this almost absurd amongst economists not to understand this idea that if you suddenly take your baseload power system and you don't do anything, because the guys who own the power stations now, like they do in Australia, like they do in France, like they do in other places, they're just going to wait. Because what happens when you hit this point here? I call this the Friedman point. And at that point, your economy is terminal, because you've suddenly taken your energy system from oversupply, designed to provide growth. Because when you're in the oversupply stage, anybody who wants to start a business, their power bill is low. They can start a business and employ people. They can start manufacturing, because manufacturing, very energy intensive. You know, I worked in manufacturing before I went to mining. You have no idea how much energy goes into making a car. There's more energy goes into making a car than what a car will generally expend in 20 years of use. Because you've got to all the metal out of the ground. You've got to process all that metal, and I've done this stuff. Then you've got to go and manufacture into stuff. Do you have any idea how many plastic parts are in a car? And plastic processing is insanely energy intensive. One company, did a lot of work with Hella, the light bulb people, and the lighting people. They do a lot of headlights, taillights for cars. We worked with them in Melbourne, Australia. By going into their factory and sequentially turning on the injection molding machines in a specific order, we dropped their power bill by several $1 million a year. Because what we didn't do What we avoided was sending this massive power spike. You go and you turn on everything in the morning, massive power spike, and it bumps your power bill into the next couple of ranges of expense. So by bringing down the energy, so this is what I understand about energy use. And the moment you take your energy system from oversupply to undersupply your terminal, because you can no longer grow your businesses because energy costs too much. I did a lot of work in the mid-90s for a company called Spick and Span Garden Sheds. I make those little, you go down to Target, Kmart, whatever, you buy a box and there's a pile of sheets and whatever and metal sheets, and you make a little garden shed. I was talking to the production manager there one day, and this would have been about 1993, 94, and I said, Dave, his name was Dave, I said, how come you aren't moving this factory to Asia like everyone else is? And he says, what's the point? Labor doesn't mean anything to us anymore. We'd automated their system. Their labor cost in those garden sheds, 2%.
No.
One of the great myths that economists have been pumping into the airwaves, particularly in Australia, for the last 25, 30 years is our labour costs are too high. Our labour costs are too high. Well, I did a lot of work because I work with companies like Hella. We knew the Europeans. We're going, well, how can you manufacture when Germany has the highest labour rates in the world? It doesn't make sense. The problem was the economists privatised the energy system. We got to the friction point and suddenly energy went through the roof. That was what killed manufacturing in places like Australia, California, parts of Europe, parts of England. It wasn't labour, it was energy costs. And you can go and ask any of the production managers and they will tell you that sort of stuff. This is economists, and they have lied and lied and lied and lied about this stuff.
No, they haven't. They haven't lied, Tony. You have to know what you're talking about to lie. Okay, they're bullshitted. They don't understand it, and like I'm going through that right now.
Yeah, well, this is so what I'm saying.
Absolutely vital.
Is what Ty needs to understand, and this is what terrifies me. We've now got in Australia a fleet of incredibly old power stations. And you get to a point where you cannot keep them working. It's impossible. When they turned like a coal-fired power station, if you built them in the 60s or 70s, at brand spanking new, you might get 30% thermal efficiency. By the time they turned off Hazelwood, which is in my home state of Victoria, it was under 20 because it was that clapped out.
Yeah.
Right, when they turned off Liddell, I mean, they brought the engineers at Liddell got so desperate a number of years ago, they just had an open house for every media organisation, and they went around showing them. They said, "Here's an elevator that hasn't worked for 5 years. Nobody will spend any money because what are economists always pushing with efficiency? Lower costs."
Marginal costs.
So what do they push down? What's the one thing every economist attacks an engineer on? Maintenance.
Yeah.
They will attack us in maintenance every day of the week. This is like one of the reasons I started to get interested in economics was how do I push back against these people? This is why I started watching people like Mark Blythe, Stephanie Keane, all these people so I could learn the language so that I could draw that graph and say, hey,
actually,
guys.
I can give you a hand straight away. I give you a hand straight away, Tony, and that is the bullshit that they work on is the idea that marginal cost rises. So the cost they worry about is the extra cost of producing extra additional unit. And they argue that what all firms experience, what they call diminishing marginal productivity. So the idea they have is there's a fixed amount of capital, and you employ 100% of your capital, which is a bit weird to begin with, but you employ all your capital with whether your variable input, and they normally make labor the variable input. And they imagine you've got an ideal ratio of workers to machines. And they argue that competition drives you to work past that point. So you have more labor per machine than is ideal. And if you want to produce more output, you have to put extra labor in there, and that the extra work will be just as individually efficient as all previous workers. But because there's too many workers per machine, you'll get less output out of each additional worker. And it's complete and absolute bollocks. Because any firm that behaved that way would be chaotic. And if you look at the textbooks, I recommend you go and take a look at a textbook like Mancure, For God's sake, don't buy it. Download it for free. You can find a PDF on the web somewhere. A lot of Russian PDFs of Mankiw. And he'll have an example of what he calls Thirsty Thelma's juice company. And what he has, the idea is that after a certain amount of output, workers have got a queue to use the machine, and therefore get more and more inefficiency. Total bullshit. Because you've designed a factory, you know what a manufacturing site is like. You design it so it's maximum efficiency at maximum capacity, and you're because you're competing with your rival firms, you have excess capacity, and you have idle machinery you only turn on when demand gets to be high enough for it. So what you have is your fixed cost, average fixed cost, and you've got to do it so people see it properly on screen. By the way, your graph was actually back to the front, but I could read what you were trying to do. I've got my hand to go the right way. I've got to go this way. So you have you have falling average fixed costs, constant marginal costs, and therefore and a constant price because you've set your price at a target above your target level of output. Every extra unit you sell adds profit. You have an increasing level of profit. So that's the real situation for most firms. Let's take a look on my Patreon site and also Substack, and you'll find a post called Profit Maximization in the Real World. And it's very, very simple mathematics that I do there, or you'll eat it for breakfast. But I simply show that the proper idea is to sell as many units as you can. It means marginal cost is pretty much irrelevant. What's important is reducing your fixed cost per unit of output. And that's what you're talking again with base load power. That's a very, very similar thing. Cost a fortune to build the actual station in the first instance. You get maximum profit by putting it as close to capacity as possible. Anyway, you can undermine them by taking on that particular point. And they've got a theory of the cost of firms, which is completely false. And that's where a large part of their madness comes from.
So we've got Andrew here sitting in queue. Andrew, can you hear us? And can we hear you? Andrew, you get 5 more seconds because there's a waiting list of people outside of the room. Andrew, are you there? Andrew is now removed. We've got Leonardo Kozlov. Are you there?
Yes.
There he is.
Hi.
There he is. There he is. How are you
Okay.
doing? But where are you from in the world? How are you doing? And how did you find out about Steve Keen?
Well, so I am from Argentina, like I said in the comments. But I moved to the US 2001, a long time ago. And I have a PhD in mathematics. I work as a mathematician and I still work as a mathematician when I have time. And I decided, because I wanted to be more political about the climate crisis, to do a second PhD in economics at UMass Amherst. So I'm a bit insane. So anyway, I've been working with a group of friends in Argentina for a long time, and basically the Marxian critique of political economy, if you like, but a lot of analysis that comes from the analysis of ground rents in the agricultural sector, in the mining sector, also in other countries in Latin America, for instance, in Venezuela, and oil rents, obviously. We have friends from Venezuela who work a lot in that. So, and basically I was just posting this comparative analysis of Argentina and Australia, which I think is very interesting. In fact, I had a discussion with Anwar Sheikh, who you might know recently, because he retired to UMass Amherst, well, to Amherst in general. He was at the New School, and he had this sort of intense interest in this comparison, which I wanted to explain through this concept of ground rent. But basically, Argentina and Australia start from very similar, if you like, starting points after World War II, and because of a lot of concrete conditions, Australia obviously did much better. But also at the same time, it shows sort of similar, if you like, cyclical aspects in terms of how accumulation, the lows and ebbs of growth. So I was wondering if Steve could develop that a bit more, and particularly in terms of uh, foreign exchange reserves, because that's actually in terms of what's being used today in terms of by a physical input-output tables and so on. There's an analysis by people at the French Development Agency where they put a lot of emphasis on this, also a group of Italian economists, on how, basically economies that are heavy specialized, depend a lot on their foreign exchange reserves, are very much exposed to an energy transition. And there doesn't seem to be many solutions on that. So I guess that's my PhD project. So anyway, that was my question.
Well, I mean, I can actually answer on the French Development Agency. So have you seen some work at the French Development Agency on Argentina? Because that's being done by two ex-colleagues of mine, Deborah Yilmaz and Antoine Godin.
Yeah, and Tango,
they're both
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so they're both post-Keynesian non-equilibrium modelers. Devram, in particular, is a brilliant modeler in differential equation systems. So he would have been putting that work together. And I mean, a large part of it is seeing the dynamic linkages in an economy in a I mean, Mike, you'd actually be blown away by the work they're doing. It's huge scale, but they're all doing it raw in Mathematica, straight differential equations, the large scale input output sort of vector differential equation models of economies. And they tailor make each of them for the countries they're working with. So if you'd like to get in touch with them, Leonardo,
I've
drop me your
actually
email and I'll pass your email on to Devram. And he's a bit slow in answering questions, but he will be able to answer that for
I've
you, I think.
actually talked to a Brazilian member of that group, Guilherme Magacho. They have Devrim, Antoine, and Guilherme and Etienne, and because I'm doing a replication of their paper actually in R, so
Yeah.
I'm talking to Guilherme about this. Yes, but I was wondering if you could bring this back with a comparison with Australia. I think that's
Right?
if you could.
Didn't hear properly.
Yeah, if you could bring this back with the comparison between Australia and Argentina.
Yeah. Um, I'm I'm probably almost out of touch with Australia's economy I am with Argentina's, frankly. Haven't been away for a decade. I think a major element of why countries like Australia succeeded initially, and they're starting to fail now, is there was a strong emphasis upon getting a high income for the workers. If you read what's called the White Paper on Employment in Australia after the Second World War, there was a classic line in it where it said the objective of government policy should be to put such pressure upon the economy as to guarantee a shortage of men rather than a shortage of jobs. And what that meant was you had a high level of income for the low income earners in your society, and and that is the opposite of what neoclassical economists have been pushing. So the income distribution meant there was large working class um, consumption demand. Uh, you had you're going to survive that. You had to have decent technological levels in your industries, and so Australian, in particular, broadacre agriculture was quite efficient, quite productive, and again, very good use of energy and water in those cases as well. Um, and the main thing we've actually demolished that in the last 30 or 40 years. And so what we're left with is a very, Tony was talking about this in quite a bit of detail, very well organized, very productive minerals sector. Uh, but a lot of that profit is now going offshore. It's not held in domestically. You're not reinvesting it. So I'm quite critical of the direction Australia has taken. Argentina, I think, is just simply trapped in that incredible inequality that you can relate right back to the Spanish days, and the hacienda development and the incredible wealth of the rich, and that means you don't get a great deal of low domestic demand. They're mainly buying imported goods. Argentina doesn't produce what they want to buy, and you get caught in a classic balance of payments trap at low investment domestically at the same time. So Australia, because of its particularly after the Second World War and the Great Depression, the orientation was to ensure the highest standard of living you could for the majority of the population, and that laid the foundation of the post-Second World War growth that Australia went through, but we've been heading back towards the Argentinian direction ever since, courtesy of economists.
Ghost, are you still with us?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So you are you're gonna read the list, Ghost. You've been on
Oh,
it
boy.
every time. So
My karma
Revenge.
catches up with me.
yeah, and so this is going to be pretty heavy for you because I'm going to remember how you read this for the rest of our time on internet land. So here it is: top chatters, top commenters by Ghost on the Half Shelf from 2 weeks
Half
ago.
shelf?
Whatever, half shell, half shelf. I'll just call you Ghost from now on.
There we go.
Here it is. Let's read
All
it.
right. From the top, Hans Drudolf Sutter, excuse me, Dave Collins, Alex Plant, Chris, Ghost on the Half Shell, Wayne McMillan, Tony Wilson, Paula Butala, Stephen Hinton, Jonathan Gibson, Ernesto Eduardo Dabarganes, Larry Summers, Go Larry, Lost Adult, Michael D. Souza Cruz, WWE Fan 0104, The Hasty Ant, Algorithm, The Minstrel 55, Thomas Sudej, sorry for brutalizing that, TR, Dre Guy, Danger Zone, Economics in One Lesson, Duncan McCowan, Botched Mandela, The Libertarian, and Maria Sedin. Moderately. I butchered some things.
Tony, sorry, you tie you go. Yeah.
I just wanted Tamaz, did she get your name right?
I think I butchered it. Sorry.
Surde.
Sude.
For a day. Okay.
Tomash.
Tony, you
Yeah,
were talking about finite element analysis quite a bit in the chats there. How about, I mean, and mate, you're a bit like when you can talk under wet cement. You could probably talk under dry cement. But don't worry about it. Give us a rave. We'll start hitting the bell at about the 5-minute mark, but give us a good background into what finite element analysis is about, what it's designed to do, its strengths, its weaknesses, the software, and so on. Because I want Mike to pick up on this as well.
Okay, you hear me? Can you all hear me? Okay, good.
Yep.
Right. Okay, if we can see that, right. Imagine you've got a beam sticking out from a wall, and on the end of the beam, you've got a point load. In basic engineering, day one, we can come up with a formula that will say exactly how that beam will bend. And we can do that. But once you start getting to where it's a complicated structure, you have to start breaking things down. And I'll draw the simplest truss I can. Right, now imagine you've got something like a truss bridge. Right, very simple thing. You see them across rivers all the time. The problem you get then is how do you start to understand the details in each one of those trusses? How much in each beam there is being bent, being twisted? And the most fundamental aspect, and it actually goes back to partly of what Mike's talked about with PID algorithms, the most fundamental thing we start with is a spring. And if you've ever done that high school experiment where you start stretching a spring and you work out that you get a formula that's F equals KX, what we do is we model each of those elements in the bridge as if it's a spring.
Okay.
And then what we end up creating is it looks like a matrix problem. You've got a column matrix equals a square matrix multiplied by another column matrix. And what you've got to do is invert that matrix. So in other words, what you're doing is you're taking each one of the parts of the bridge and you're making it into a finite element for which you can write a mathematical model. And that mathematical model ends up in certain parts of the matrix. This is why aerospace engineers end up having to do an extra 2 classes of math. We do one in matrices and vectors, so we can do that sort of work.
Mm-hmm.
And we do another one in very high level differential equations, so we can do things like aerodynamics and spacecraft dynamics. And if I try to tell you about that, you will all pass out from brain fade. But basically what finite element analysis is, instead of having a formula for something as simple as a beam, what you're doing is you're effectively, if you've ever seen those pretty patterns where they put a mesh over everything, what you're doing is that you're creating little elements, and each one of those elements is modeled like a spring. And if you get into, except when you get to things like carbon fiber, where you've got the weaves going this way, that way, and all sorts of ways, that mathematical model gets very complex. And my professor was one of the world leaders of doing that when I was doing this stuff back in 1987. And to give you an idea of how lucky I was, when I was at RMIT doing MEC-Eng, the entire Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology had a cyber mainframe computer for about 6,000 students. When I was doing work for this professor, I had a cyber mainframe to myself. And I was doing finite element work on the hypersonic anti-tank projectile coming out of the Abrams M1 tank. And I was doing that. That was dynamic finite element and then dynamic modeling. And I was doing that in 1987. So I was kind of lucky. Just so that you know, the University of Illinois, down the street, that was when they had the first of the Cray supercomputers. I wasn't in the cool kids. That's why I only had the little old cyber mainframe. The cool kids were playing on the Cray supercomputer. But the idea of finite element is to give you detail. So in other words, you can, if you have a beam, and say that beam, if it's a uniform beam, it's great. But if you start putting a few holes in it, like that, if you can see that, suddenly the stress around those holes changes. So how do you work out what's going on around those holes because you've wanted to have a lighter beam? Well, that's where finite element comes into it, is that you break the whole beam down into so many microscopic elements. And what you end up getting, fold my bit of paper in another way, is that in any one bit of it, you can get, I'll just draw two elements. If you've got two elements like that, and you model them as springs, well, these two nodes here and here, what changes on one element changes on the other element. So there's the interaction there. And what you end up getting is, it still comes back to that very basic spring equation of F equals Kx, except what you've got is that you've got hundreds, if not thousands, of these little springs all tied together. And because they're interlinked at the nodes, what happens you can start at one end and you can just work your way through it. And we do the same thing in aerodynamics, where you start at one end and you just work your way through it as this gigantic matrix and vector processing problem, which is where things like Cray supercomputers were just this massive game changer. And this is how they model things like the Earth at the moment. We talk about things there as except that the elements there are kind of large. If you look at the surface of the Earth, it's about 500 million cubic square kilometers. If you look at just the first kilometer of atmosphere above it, then that's 500 million cubic kilometers of air. If you want to heat that by 1 degree, guess, to give you an idea, I did the math on this. If you want to take that 500 million cubic kilometers and raise it 1 degree, guess how many atomic bombs you need to use?
15 billion?
Not quite. 9.5 million Hiroshimas.
Yeah.
And that's just the first kilometer. It's like because I was lucky. We had this guest lecture one day, and there was a guy from NASA who'd just done a project on, is it possible to terraform Mars? And he just basically said no. It's just ridiculous. Like Elon Musk and them, look, this was 1987, and we'd work it out. It was just ridiculous, because if you take the same thing, if you just want to put a 1 kilometer layer of air around Mars, it's 178 trillion tons of Earth normal air. Where are you going to get 178 trillion, not billion, trillion with a T, tons of air? It's just, yeah. And like, this is one of the things that with the Earth, it's, when you want to heat the air up by 1 degree, and you're just talking the first kilometer of 100 kilometers, it takes 9.5 million Hiroshimas. That's the sort of stuff where, when you talk about this sort of thing, went to an aerospace engineer who's happened to come into contact with these people, what we're talking about. And the way to model that, and this is what the climate guys do, is that they break it down. They say, well, look, we can't come up with a set of equations that just explain everything. So they break it into these cubes. And they'll basically take it and they'll have, 500 million or half a billion, 500 million 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer cubes. And they'll watch the airflow go from this one to this one to this one to this one. What happens when you heat this one up? What happens when this one's got more moisture in it? That's what we mean by finite elements, is you break it down into these, but they're attached to each other. So what's going from the boundary of one to the boundary of the next one translates over.
Using conservation laws to do that.
Yeah. So where I think that's going to come into, where I see it in economics, and if we go all the way back, and you got to remember, as an engineer, we base things like work and energy. We have these very, very, very simple formulas for it. Things like a spring, F equals Kx. Work is defined as basically how much, what work is. 1 joule of work, or 1 watt of work, is what does it take to move 1 kilo of mass 1 meter. But the really fundamental, and probably the biggest mistake I see in economics, and I brought this up a couple of weeks ago, is the idea of value. Well, what actually is value? Because I heard Mark Blythe, when he was asked about Bitcoin, he said, well, for it to be a money, it's got to be a means of account, a means of exchange, and a means of store of value. Well, okay, well, what was that? That first term, means of account, tricked me for a while, and then I suddenly realized what he meant. It's a way to measure the ambiguous thing. Like if you say, what's length, and you go, well, yeah, if you try to ask somebody, what is length, it becomes a very ambiguous thing until you turn around and you say, we've got the metric system, and the metric system is, if you go from here to here, it's so many centimeters. What money is the equivalent concept to what we have in all the other sciences. It's how you measure this ambiguous thing. And what currencies are, and this will fall back into the Argentinian discussion, what currencies are is the standard form of measuring value in their thing. Just like in we had the British system of units with feet, pounds, and inches, and we had the metric system. What every country has basically had is its own system of currency, which is a standardized method of measuring value. This is why like Mark Blythe's brought up the subject. This is the problem with the whole European Union. They handed away all of their ability to control.
Okay.
we gotta try to get Andrew here on. He's
can you just wrap that back into the Argentinian thing? Like, because the Argentinians right now are trying to do what Mark Blythe said has killed Europe. Can somebody bring that one back in?
Let's get Andrew on. Let's get Andrew on. Andrew, are you there? Oh well, I cut off Tony for you, Andrew, and now I look like a big dick. Andrew,
you're a Canadian. We all know you're big dicks, okay? Take away their hockey sticks, and what are they?
Okay, we're going to give up on Andrew here. But Mike, your thoughts on everything? Actually, Andrew said a lot of cool things about value there. What are your thoughts?
Well, I guess
overloaded his brain.
Yeah, I'm not sure I have a lot to say on value at the moment. I haven't completely digested that one. I do want to. Doug early on asked about collective bargaining, and it seems like in his observation that unions have been making progress right now, and what do we think about that, and what have you. And so my thoughts turn to my days studying labor economics as a student, and there's sort of the neoclassical approach to that. And so in my graduate labor course, the first couple of weeks were all about that: labor leisure trade-offs and Lagrangian multipliers and constrained optimization and the standard stuff. And then the professor, after 2 weeks, said, all right, enough of that shite. Now let's do real labor economics. And the rest of the semester was an institutionalist approach to labor economics. And among the things that he had us do, we were sent out into the field to find out what the heck happens during collective bargaining. And so I was asked to interview a UAW, United Auto Worker negotiator. And he was telling me all sorts of interesting stories about his days negotiating with, at the time it was American Motors. It doesn't exist anymore, but it was one of the big automakers in the United States. But here's my point. The guy who taught us this, Chuck Crapo, was a well-known labor economist, an institutionalist labor economist. And he had a very different model. He gave us a framework when we did these interviews for talking about collective bargaining. And it was ability to pay, ability to make pay. And his argument was that actually firms in certain industries like unions. They like stability. And whether or not they reach a stable situation, it involves his model of ability to pay and ability to make pay. And there are elements of each of those. And if you had both of those things, if the union had the ability to make the firm pay and the firm had the ability to pay, they would reach a nice collective bargaining situation for labor, and management had a stable situation, and all was right with the world. So a year or two ago, I was asked to give a talk, a day-long kind of system dynamics seminar out at Bard College at the Levy Institute in their graduate program in institutional economics. And I thought, well, what would interest those folks? And I thought of Chuck. And so I built a system dynamics model of ability to pay, ability to make pay. And I think that's kind of if I don't know if Doug is still here, but if you wanted to analyze things through that lens, I think you look at the economy kind of like Galbraith did, John Kenneth Galbraith. You have the price maker sectors, the firms that have market power. Then there's the price takers, kind of your gig economy today, folks, and your restaurants and stuff like that. And so you're going to look towards the firms with monopolistic power, right? The ability to set prices. And then you look at the collective bargaining, the labor firm interactions. And so I have a model I built, and it has a lot of interesting stuff going on in it. Basically, the firm has an administered pricing sector like Linwood Tauhid was talking about a couple of weeks ago. That's a classic idea in institutional economics. And basically what happens is there's a markup over unit costs. And the firms play with the markup depending on pressures and strategies and what have you. And that determines, based on other stuff going on, their ability to pay. And then there's the demands from collective bargaining. And if they can pay, they'll pay. The laborers have more of ability to demand more if they're more highly unionized, and they're more likely to unionize and collectively bargain if the union has been winning and if they're happy. If not, they say, what's the point of paying union dues? We don't get anywhere. So there's all sorts of feedbacks and interactions going on there. And I think that's ultimately, if one were to analyze this stuff from a complex systems point of view at the macro level, you'd probably want a macro model that had a sort of a John Kenneth Galbraith point of view, where there's a price setting sector or collection of firms or industries, and then a price taking collection of firms or sector. And then you'd want to look at the collective bargaining dynamics as a la Chuck Crapo, ability to pay and ability to make pay. And when I did my interviewing of the UAW negotiator, it was spot on in terms of what the guy was telling me and this particular framework for thinking about collective bargaining, the success of collective bargaining, and what have you. So that leaped to mind when Doug asked that question earlier.
I'll give you a little anecdote from my very early days. Back when I was a student, my then girlfriend was doing a course in industrial relations, and they got this similar sort of thing you're talking about, Mike. We had to go and interview a particular union, and she got the vehicle builders union. So I thought I'll tag along here and see what happens. I was a bit skeptical because the vehicles builders union was very much tops down, told the workers what to do and so on type of union. And she was talking to the leader of it, and I was talking to the staff outside, and I decided to ask them, what car do you drive? And they started chatting away about it. Holden is General Motors in Australia, Holden, Ford, and the ravishing of the Japanese cars. And I caught up with her later and said, they were talking about cars like consumers. They weren't talking about cars like people who make the cars. So these are people who got into the union to get away from the factory floor. And then we got to see the head of the union as well together. And he was saying how people talk about soap in the washroom and stuff like that. We negotiate about the big stuff, the pay and the pensions and so on. And I walked outside and said, look, these guys have got themselves completely separated from the workforce. They've got into the union to get away from being workers. I reckon they're in big trouble at some point. Well, about 2 weeks later, as it happens, the Vehicle Builders Union organiser went down to a port in Adelaide and was literally thrown over the barbed wire fence by the workers. But having worked in a few factories myself, I said, it actually matters if there's soap inside the washroom. Those sorts of conditions stuff mean you're actually talking about what the workers want to know about internally. So there are some ways in which workers, they get too corporatized. They end up being anti the workers themselves and what the workers actually desire. And I've seen that both in a couple of metalworking roles I've had at various times in my early life. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thomas Sensio, I don't know if I pronounced that right. Are you there? This is your chance to be a star.
Hello.
There he is. Let me bring up a multi-screen here. There he is. Thomas, where are you, Thomas, in the world?
Sensio.
Hi, hello there. Can you hear me? I'm in Venezuela.
Oh, okay.
I'm Venezuela. Yeah, and I just was dropping by to. I wanted to listen about what your opinions about the dollarization in Argentina, and just give a small perspective of what we have here in Venezuela as dollarization. And it's kind of like you would call it half baked, or I mean, it's not even formal, in the sense that we have. You were mentioning before what the 3 requirements for a currency to be a called a currency, like a store of value, like something you could trade in, and you must know those things by heart. And we always think about it because when you go to the supermarket here in Venezuela, you have something that's called ref. It's like reference, and everybody knows it's US dollar. But since here the government doesn't say officially it's a US dollar, they just call it ref. So my son and I joke about it. No, yeah, you owe me 5 refs, or I owe you 10 refs, and so on. And then everybody has dollars in their checkbook, in their wallets. And for instance, the maid that works at home, I'm lucky enough to have a maid. I pay her in dollar bills, and she takes them home. Then she has to sometimes change them when she has to grab a bus, because you don't pay with. I mean, change here is really hard to get. So you can get bills of $10, $20, $50, $100, but it's hard to get like $1 bills, and you don't see coins. You don't say US dollar coins. But what you really don't see is Venezuelan currency. It's really hard to see also. And most people, and many people don't use it. I mean, there's like a statistic here. You can ask people here. I mean, there are companies that do polls, and they have the statistics. And last time I read something like that, they said that 60% of the money that was transacted in the country is dollar based. So big operations, dollar based. You can go to if you're going to buy a car. I mean, let me see here. Here's a parking lot, and used cars and stuff. And so if you can see that, for instance, I have a Toyota in front of me. They sell that car. They're going to sell it not in bolivars, but they're going to sell it in dollars. So you can get like $8,000. You have to pay for that and so on. So everything here is dollars. They just don't call it that way. They just don't call it that way. The government itself, I mean, just by principle, won't say that it's a dollarized. They just call it reference or whatever. Everybody ignores it, but in effect, it's a dollarization, which is really good because it's like the best thing, the best unannounced measure they've made, but it's just something that we have been waiting for decades. I mean, I've been living here all my life. I'm 50 plus, and it's the first time they do something that the IMF would have asked them to do, but the IMF didn't say because the IMF doesn't have a relationship with Venezuela. Nobody has a relationship with Venezuela. They just did what the IMF told them to do about 30 years ago, and they did it even more than that. I mean, it's because I don't know if you know, Venezuela is kind of famous for, well, obviously Hugo Chavez, who is dead and so. And but before that, he said he was inspired by 1989 because the government had like a dream team of economists. You must know who Ricardo Hausmann is, because he made like a chart of exports.
Yeah.
So if you see those little square charts of export, that's Ricardo Hausmann. That guy is a genius. I mean, he's really good. I mean, he's like one of the best things we produce here. He was in the government in 1989, and we had like a dream team. The problem that the dream team was good at being economists, but they weren't very good at selling their ideas and selling what the hell they were doing. Sorry for that. Selling what they were doing. So they did that. They said, okay, we're going to increase this here. We're going to do some stuff that the IMF told us to do. And then it was all mayhem. And the city blew up. I mean, Caracas, I'm here in Valencia. Caracas is the capital is about 2 hours away. And it was terrible. And people were killed. And the military just went loose. And so it was really awful. And then Chavez, the famous Chavez, said he was inspired by that and said, oh, the government was mean and so on. And then, okay, fine. But what the IMF asked them to do then, okay, is softer than what they're doing right now. And they just don't announce it. I mean, right now there's dollarization, in de facto dollarization. I mean, you can use your dollars, just try not to say it out loud, right? And a transaction. There are subsidies. There are hardly, I mean, all those subsidies that we had before, now we don't have them. So you say cost of living is kind of high. That's why you see millions of people leaving the country, okay? Because the subsidies are really loose. But that has had the effect of, because 2016, 2017, when the prices started to hit terribly, they still had the subsidies, but you would go to a supermarket and you wouldn't find anything, okay? So somehow they talked, okay? It wasn't in the news, it wasn't public. Somehow they just turned around and said, look, you know what? If you keep on with this, we're not going to have a country. And these people that we have been able to more or less hold back, they're going to go and overrun us and they're going to kill us, okay? Because there's going to be a revolution that we're not going to be able to stop with bullets or whatever, okay? So somehow they said that. I said, okay, fine, let's go use dollars. Let's allow importers to use dollars. Let's allow people to sell the food in dollars, okay? Food got more expensive, okay? There wasn't like free chicken. There wasn't like free stuff, right? Well, there still is. There's some subsidized boxes that they call glap, and well, it says the box, but they're sometimes in the bag, so there is some food that is subsidized. It's not enough, but people still get it, but it's not at the level that they had before. And subsidies in gasoline and so on, they reduce them. Okay, fine. So where I want to get here is to, when we talk about dollarization, there's dollarization in El Salvador, which I was lucky enough to visit. Okay, so El Salvador is a really poor country that, you know, I mean, you just go and look at all the statistics, but they do have dollarization there. They have dollarization. There's dollarization in Ecuador. I haven't been able to visit there. And there's like a partial dollarization here in Venezuela. So whatever Argentina can do as to move towards dollarization, even if it's not a full dollarization, even if it's not a clean dollarization, even if it's not the prettiest dollarization that everybody will be proud of, they should do it because it's going to be worth it. Whatever they earn, I mean, even from the poorest people from the other, they're going to earn, I mean, people are going to be more confident about what they make, okay? And whatever, it's not butter money. It's not like money that you're going to go and want to get rid of it tomorrow every time you get it, okay? A dollar is a dollar. You say, oh, I'll keep it 6 months from now. There's some good numbers coming up. There's some traditional food here in Christmas that people always make. There's like a corn, it's full of meat and stuff, and it's really delicious. It's called a yaca. And every time we reach December, they always say, what's the price of a yaca? How much did it increase? If it increased 50%, 80%, 200%. So they came out and they said recently, they said, okay, fine. In the local currency, it increased 100%. In dollars, it increased 0. Okay. So you have in dollars, which people are starting to get used to, or I mean, they're already used to, okay, because we've been having this for some years. Okay, people are already saying, you know what, it's the same price as last year. So people are learning about it. People are comfortable. I'm talking about the average person. I'm not talking about the engineer that went to who knows what and is talking speaking English with you. No, I'm talking about the average person, the common person, deals with dollars, likes dollars, will try not to accept bolivars. Like I said, the maid will tell, I told her, hey, can I pass you a bolivars? No, please, I'll wait for the dollars. I'll wait for the dollars, right? They like that, they work with that, and that's the important thing, you know, here. We want to work for the people. I mean, it's not like we're oh yeah, we want to work for the people, but we really want to work for the people, okay? And the people will appreciate a dollarization because they will be paid in dollars, hopefully, because here the government doesn't pay in dollars because they're not dumb. I mean, they say, okay, we don't have enough money, so if we pay in dollars, we're committed to pay $100 today. We have to pay $100 next month, and we don't know if we ever have that. So that's why you have public employees don't get paid in dollars. They're just getting increases, but they're not increases. But whatever Argentina can do to move towards dollarization, the people will really appreciate it. And that's pretty much my point based on what I live here in Venezuela. So.
Thanks, Thomas. That's good to get the opinions. We have a wide variety of people from across the globe today. So that was interesting to hear a perspective from a citizen from Venezuela. That could apply to Argentina. We are getting close to the end of the 2 hours already. This was kind of our first attempt at having an open chat. We're going to do it again, I'm sure, in a few months. I just have to refine it a bit. It's very hard to get everybody on and have a turn and keep it coherent, but I'll work on that, and hopefully next time it'll be a little less chaotic, but I think it's been kind of fun. Seems like everybody in the chat has liked it, and hopefully some people have gotten some good information. We strayed away from the topic of Argentina, but guess what? I didn't know anything about Argentina anyways, and it seems like Steve didn't either.
Not very much.
I'll get one last comment. Let's bring in Tomaz Sergey. You're sitting there.
Sergey.
Sergey.
Day, my friend. Okay, you unmuted me.
You're unmuted.
Yeah.
You're gonna have the final word today.
Okay. I don't know what final word. Okay, live long and prosper, and onwards and upwards. I don't know what I'm gonna.
Well, that's.
Thank you.
That's very inspiring. What you could have said is join us next week. We'll have a special guest.
Okay, yeah, I'm terrible at marketing.
That's okay. So am I. Anyways, well, that's gonna be a wrap. We're gonna cover China next week, and we got a very special guest coming on to do that. So hopefully you're all around for that. Make sure you hit that notification bell on the Prof. Steve Keen YouTube channel. That is, if you've subscribed, hit that like button. It helps with the algorithm. If you've been watching on X, formerly known as Twitter, make sure you hit the like button there, repost, and then always make sure to come over here, join the chat. We will see you next week. Bye-bye.